Chapter 1. Sometimes we think family means protection, loyalty, blood before all else. But for Liora Voss, family meant standing on an auction block while her father counted gold, and the only person who flinched when the chains went on wasn't allowed to be hers. The iron smelled like blood. That's what Liora noticed first. Not the crowd pressing close with their perfumed silks and polished boots. Not the auctioneer's voice cutting through the market square like a blade. Just the iron cuffs around her wrists, cold and sharp, smelling like every wolf who'd worn them before her. She didn't look at her father. Couldn't. If she did, she'd break. And breaking wasn't an option when 200 humans were watching a werewolf stand on a platform like livestock. Her bare feet ached against the wood. They'd taken her shoes 3 days ago. Took her coat. Took the small silver locket her mother gave her before she died. Left her in a thin dress that didn't quite reach her knees, grey fabric that showed every shiver. The auctioneer was talking. Numbers. Big ones. She heard them like they belonged to someone else. Rare specimen, ladies and gentlemen. Pure bloodline. 22 years old. Healthy. Obedient. Obedient. The word tasted like ash. Someone in the crowd laughed. A woman in a feathered hat leaned toward her companion, whispering behind a gloved hand. Liora's wolf stirred under her skin, a low snarl that wanted out. She crushed it down. They'd told her what happened to wolves who shifted during auction. The scars on the back of the man in the cage next to hers had told her the rest. Her father stood at the edge of the platform. Beta Gregor Voss. Broad-shouldered. Greying hair slicked back. Hands clasped behind him like he was watching a business transaction. Not his daughter. Not the girl he used to carry on his shoulders during pack runs. The auctioneer raised his gavel. Bidding starts at 5,000 gold. A paddle lifted. Then another. Liora's stomach twisted. She kept her eyes forward, locked on the fountain in the center of the square. Stone wolves carved into the base, frozen mid-leap. Irony thick enough to choke on. 8,000. 10. 12,000 gold. The numbers climbed. Her value, apparently. She wondered if her father was proud. If this was enough to save the pack's debts. If he'd sleep well tonight knowing he'd sold his own blood to humans who looked at her like a curiosity. A pet. 15,000. The voice came from the back. Deep. Measured. The crowd shifted, necks craning. Liora's eyes flicked toward the sound before she could stop herself. A man stepped forward. Tall. Dark hair swept back from a face too sharp to be kind. He wore black, head to toe, with gold thread embroidered along the collar. A crown sat on his head, small, understated, but unmistakable. King Dominic Hale. She'd heard stories. Human king who'd been buying wolves for 2 years now. Kept them in his palace like trophies. Her throat closed. 15,000, the auctioneer repeated, breathless. Going once. 20. Different voice. Liora's head snapped right. A man stood near the platform's edge. Younger than the king. Maybe 30. Brown hair, sun-touched skin, dressed like a lord but standing like a soldier. His eyes, pale green, almost grey, were locked on her. Not the way the others looked. Not like she was a thing. Like she was a problem he didn't know how to solve. Her wolf surged. Recognition slammed into her chest so hard she stumbled back a step. The chain between her wrists rattled. No. Not possible. Not here. Not now. Mate. The word screamed through every nerve. She felt him in her bones, in the pulse hammering at her throat. The air between them pulled tight, electric. His jaw clenched. She watched his hands curl into fists at his sides. He felt it too. 20,000 from Lord Rylan Cross of the Northern Territories, the auctioneer announced. A generous bid. Rylan. Alpha. She knew that name. Everyone did. The most powerful pack in the north, the one that stayed out of human politics, the one other wolves whispered about with equal parts fear and respect. And he was her mate. King Dominic smiled. Slow. Calculating. 25. The crowd murmured. Leora's heart kicked against her ribs. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think past the bond screaming at her to run to him, to close the distance, too. 30, Rylan said. His voice stayed level, but something flickered in his eyes. Desperation, maybe. Fury. 40. The king didn't hesitate, didn't blink. Just raised the bid like it was nothing, like she was nothing, and Liora realized with sickening clarity that this wasn't about her. This was about dominance. A human king and a wolf alpha locked in a pissing contest, and she was the prize neither could afford to lose. Rylan's shoulders tensed. She saw the calculation behind his eyes, saw the exact moment he realized he couldn't win. Not without exposing why he wanted her. Not without starting a war. 40,000 gold, the auctioneer said, voice trembling with greed. Going once. Rylan didn't move, didn't speak, but his eyes stayed on hers, and she felt the apology in them like a knife. Going twice. Her father shifted his weight. Still didn't look at her. Sold. To King Dominic Hale for 40,000 gold. The gavel cracked down. The crowd erupted. Leora's knees tried to buckle. She locked them, forced herself to stand straight while the king approached the platform, boots clicking against stone. He stopped in front of her. Up close, his eyes were dark, empty. He reached out, lifted her chin with one gloved finger. She resisted the urge to bite. "You'll do nicely," he said. Then, to her father, "The gold will be delivered by morning." Gregor nodded. Once. Still didn't meet her eyes. 2 guards appeared. Human. Armed. They took the chain connecting her wrists and pulled. She followed because fighting would only make it worse. The crowd parted. She walked through them with her head up, her wolf clawing at her insides, the mate bond stretching thinner with every step away from Rylan. She glanced back once. He was still standing there, watching her go. A woman had appeared at his side, blonde, beautiful, wearing a silver dress that probably cost more than Leora's life. She touched his arm, leaned close, said something that made him finally look away. The bond twisted. Painful. Wrong. Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you're hooked already, a like and subscribe will keep these stories coming. The palace swallowed her whole. Grey stone walls. Vaulted ceilings. Tapestries depicting human victories over wolves. Hunts, conquests, wolves on their knees. She stopped looking after the third one. The guards led her through corridors that smelled like beeswax and old money, past servants who averted their eyes, past rooms with doors closed tight. They stopped at an iron door. One guard unlocked it. The other shoved her inside. The room was small. Stone floor. A cot against one wall. A bucket in the corner. A single window too high to reach, showing a slice of grey sky. The door slammed shut. The lock clicked. Liora stood in the centre of the room, chains still on her wrists, and let herself shake. Her wolf whined. Low. Mournful. Searching for a mate who wasn't coming. She sank onto the cot. The dress rode up. She didn't bother fixing it. What did modesty matter now? She was property. A thing. 40,000 gold worth of obedient. Time passed. She didn't track it. The light through the window shifted, dimmed, disappeared. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. None stopped at her door. When the lock finally turned, she was lying on her side, staring at the wall. The door opened. A woman entered. Older. Grey streaked through black hair pulled into a severe bun. She wore a housekeeper's dress, crisp and clean, and carried a tray. Up, she said. Not cruel. Just tired. Liora sat. The woman set the tray on the cot. Bread. Cheese. Water. Basic. Enough. You'll start tomorrow, the woman continued. King's orders. You're to serve in the great hall during meals. Stay quiet. Stay obedient. Don't cause trouble. Leora's throat was dry. What happens if I do? The woman's expression didn't change. Then you'll learn why the last wolf who tried only lasted 3 days. She turned toward the door, paused. Eat. You'll need your strength. The door closed. Locked. Liora looked at the food. Her stomach growled, betraying her. She picked up the bread. It was still warm. Fresh. Better than what they'd fed her in the cages. She ate because surviving was instinct. Because her wolf needed fuel. Because if she was going to figure out how to escape this nightmare, she couldn't do it weak. The bread tasted like sawdust. She finished it anyway. Night came fully. The window above showed stars, cold, distant, uncaring. She lay back down, chains dragging across the cot's thin blanket. Sleep felt impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Rylan, felt the bond pulling, heard the gavel crack. Sold. Her father's face, blank and businesslike. Sold. The woman in the silver dress, touching Rylan's arm like she had the right. Sold. Leora's nails bit into her palms. She welcomed the sting, focused on it, used it to anchor herself before the grief could pull her under. Footsteps in the corridor. Multiple sets. Voices. Low, urgent. They passed a door without stopping, fading into the distance. She exhaled, rolled onto her back, stared at the ceiling's shadows. Tomorrow, the woman said. She'd start tomorrow, serving the king who bought her, pretending to be docile while her insides screamed. And somewhere in this palace, maybe, Rylan would be watching, close enough to feel the bond, too far to do anything about it. The irony tasted worse than the bread. Sleep came eventually, fitful, full of dreams where she ran and ran, but the auction block followed, wood creaking under her feet, her father's voice announcing her price, higher and higher until the numbers swallowed her whole. She woke to grey light and the sound of the lock turning. The same woman, same tired expression. Get up. You have an hour to wash and dress. The king expects you in the hall by 8. Liora sat up slowly. Her body ached. Sleeping on stone disguised as a cot would do that. Where? Follow me. The woman led her down the corridor. Other doors lined the walls, all closed. Leora's wolf sensed others behind them. Wolves. Pack. But different packs, she realized. Different scents. All captured. All here. They reached a washroom. Basic. A tub already filled with lukewarm water. Soap. A towel. A grey dress hanging on a hook. Servant's attire, identical to what the older woman wore. 10 minutes, the woman said. Don't make me come back. She left. Didn't lock the door this time. Liora stared at it, considered running. But where? The palace was a maze. Guards everywhere. And even if she made it outside, her scent would give her away before she reached the city gates. She stripped. Washed quickly. The water turned grey. 3 days of cage filth swirling down the drain. She scrubbed until her skin was raw, until she felt almost clean, then pulled on the grey dress. It fit. Barely. Rough fabric that chafed at her wrists where the iron had rubbed her raw. The chains were gone. She noticed suddenly. They'd left them off. Small mercy, maybe. Or the king was confident she wouldn't run. He wasn't wrong. The woman returned. Nodded once at Leora's appearance. Better. Come. More corridors. Wider now. Grander. Paintings of stern-faced kings lined the walls. Liora kept her eyes forward. They passed servants, human, all of them, who glanced at her then away, quick and nervous. The great hall's doors loomed ahead. Massive oak carved with elaborate scenes. Conquests. Victories. A wolf pinned under a hunter's boot. Liora's stomach turned. The woman pushed the doors open. The hall was enormous. Vaulted ceiling held up by stone columns. Long tables arranged in rows. A head table on a raised platform at the far end. Servants moved between the tables, setting plates and goblets. The smell hit her: roasted meat, fresh bread, wine. Her mouth watered involuntarily. "You'll serve the head table," the woman said. "The king and his guests. Keep your head down. Don't speak unless spoken to. Pour wine. Clear plates. Understand?" Liora nodded. "Good. Stay here until the bell rings. Then take your position behind the king's chair. Move when the others move. Watch and learn." The woman left. Liora stood near the wall, hands clasped in front of her, and tried to slow her racing heart. Other servants bustled past, ignoring her. Minutes crawled. The hall filled with sound. Footsteps, murmured conversation, the clink of silverware. A bell chimed. The servants straightened, formed lines. Liora followed their lead, positioning herself behind the head table. The king's chair sat in the center, massive and throne-like. Empty. For now. Doors at the hall's far end opened. People entered. Nobles, Liora guessed, dressed in rich fabrics, jewelry catching the light from the chandeliers overhead. They moved toward their seats with practiced ease, laughing and talking. Then the king appeared. Dominic Hale walked with the confidence of a man who'd never been challenged. His crown caught the light. His expression was pleasant, welcoming, and utterly cold underneath. He reached his chair. Didn't sit yet. Behind him came others. Liora's breath caught. Rylan. He walked with 3 others, 2 men, 1 woman. The woman in the silver dress from yesterday. She had her hand tucked into Rylan's elbow, possessive and comfortable. Up close, she was stunning. Sharp cheekbones, blue eyes, a smile that didn't reach them. The mate bond flared. Liora's wolf snarled. She crushed it down, forced her expression neutral, her body still. Rylan's eyes swept the room. Casual. Then they found her. He stopped walking. Just for a heartbeat. Just long enough that the woman on his arm glanced at him, confused. "Lord Rylan," the king said, voice carrying. "Please. Sit." Rylan recovered. Smiled. Polite and empty. "Of course, your majesty." He took a seat 3 chairs down from the king. The woman, his fiancée, Liora realized with sick certainty, sat beside him. They were close enough that Liora could hear them if they spoke. Close enough that the bond thrummed between them like a living thing. Close enough to hurt. The king sat. Everyone else followed. Servants moved forward. Liora mimicked them, picking up a wine pitcher from the side table. Her hands shook. She steadied them. She approached the king first, poured wine into his goblet. He didn't look at her. Good. She moved down the line, poured for the nobles, kept her eyes down. Then Rylan. She stopped at his shoulder. The bond screamed. Her hand trembled as she lifted the pitcher. Wine filled his goblet, deep red, almost black. "Thank you," he said. His voice hit her like a physical blow. She nearly dropped the pitcher, caught it, set it down too hard. Wine sloshed. "Careful," the blonde woman said, sharp, amused. Liora didn't respond. Couldn't. She moved on, finished pouring, retreated to the wall. The meal began. Conversation flowed. Laughter punctuated stories Liora didn't hear. She watched the way nobles ate, delicate bites, measured sips, the way they performed civility while discussing trade routes and taxes, and which wolves were fetching the highest prices these days. Rylan barely touched his food. The blonde woman, Sienna, someone called her, leaned close to him often, touched his arm, his shoulder. He smiled at her, responded when she spoke, but his eyes kept drifting across the table to the wine pitcher Liora held. To her. The king noticed. Liora saw it happen, saw Dominic's gaze shift from his plate to Rylan. To her. Back to Rylan. Something flickered across his face. Calculation. Lord Rylan, the king said, setting down his fork. I trust you're enjoying your stay. Very much, your majesty. Rylan's voice was smooth, practiced. And your lovely fiancé. Dominic smiled at Sienna. Your wedding is soon, I understand? 2 months, Sienna said, pride in her voice. We're very much looking forward to it. As you should be. The king sipped his wine. A strong alliance between your families. Good for the northern territories. Indeed. Silence. Brief. Waited. Then Dominic glanced at Liora. Direct. Deliberate. You, girl. Come here. Her blood froze. Every eye at the table turned toward her. She forced her feet to move, crossed to the king's chair, kept her head down. Look at me, he said. She obeyed. His smile widened. Lord Rylan, what do you think of my newest acquisition? Magnificent specimen, isn't she? Pure bloodline. Cost me a fortune. Rylan's jaw tightened. She's very fine, your majesty. The king reached out, grabbed Leora's wrist, pulled her closer. I'm quite pleased with the purchase. Such control, such obedience. He looked up at her. Aren't you obedient? The words stuck in her throat. Yes, your majesty. Good. He released her, waved a dismissive hand. Back to your station. She walked away on legs that felt like water. Behind her, conversation resumed, but she felt Rylan's eyes on her back, felt the bond twisting, angry and helpless, felt the king's satisfied smile like a brand. The meal dragged on, course after course. Liora poured wine until her arms ached, cleared plates, brought new ones, became invisible the way servants do, present but unseen. Except she wasn't unseen. Rylan watched her. Sienna watched Rylan. The king watched them all. And when the meal finally, mercifully ended, when the nobles rose and filtered toward the doors, Rylan stood. Sienna took his arm. They walked past Leora's position near the wall. As they passed, Rylan's hand brushed hers. Deliberate. Quick. Contact that lasted a heartbeat. The bond sang. Then he was gone, Sienna pulling him toward the doors, her voice bright and cheerful, talking about the gardens, the weather, plans for the evening. Liora stood frozen, her hand burning where he'd touched her. A servant nudged her. Move. We need to clear the hall. She moved. But that night, locked back in her small stone room with a too-high window, she pressed her palm against the wall and felt the echo of his touch like a promise. Or a curse. She couldn't tell which. Chapter 2. The days blurred together like watercolors left in rain. Wake. Washington dress in grey. Serve. Clean. Lock the door. Sleep. Repeat. Liora learned the rhythm of captivity. How to move through the palace halls without drawing attention. How to pour wine at exactly the right angle. How to let insults slide off her skin like oil on water when nobles whispered just loud enough for her to hear. Such a shame. Beautiful creature, really. Waste of good breeding stock, if you ask me. I heard the king keeps the interesting ones for his private collection. That last one made her wolf snarl. She crushed it down. Again. Always down. Never out. 5 days since the auction. 5 days of catching glimpses of Rylan across crowded rooms. 5 days of the mate bond stretching between them like a wire-pulled taut, humming with tension neither could acknowledge. He was still here. Still pretending to negotiate some trade agreement with the king. Still walking through the palace with Sienna attached to his arm like an expensive accessory. And Liora was still serving them dinner every night. The great hall had become her personal torture chamber. 2 hours every evening watching them sit together. Watching Sienna laugh at his jokes. Watching her lean close, possessive, marking territory she didn't know was already claimed. Watching Rylan pretend Liora didn't exist while the bond screamed between them. Tonight was worse. Liora stood against the wall, wine pitcher in hand, and watched servants hang garlands of white roses along the columns. Candles everywhere. Silver instead of gold. Music drifting from somewhere. Strings, light and airy. "What's the occasion?" she'd asked another servant earlier. The girl, human, maybe 16, had looked at her with pity. Celebration dinner. The king's announcing Lord Rylan's engagement formally. Big honor, having it here. Liora's stomach had dropped to her feet. Now she stood in her assigned position, grey dress pressed and clean, and waited for the knife to twist deeper. The bell chimed. Nobles entered. More than usual. The hall filled with silk and jewels and laughter that echoed off stone. Liora counted them mechanically. 43, 44, 45. Then the king appeared. Dominic wore burgundy tonight. His crown caught candlelight. He moved through the crowd like a shark through water, smooth, predatory, smiling. Behind him came Rylan and Sienna. Sienna wore white. Of course she did. A gown that looked like it cost a kingdom, fitted perfectly to her frame. Diamonds at her throat. Hair swept up in an elaborate style. She glowed. Rylan wore black. His face was carefully blank. His hand rested at the small of Sienna's back, proper, appropriate, distant. But his eyes found Liora immediately. The bond flared. Hot. Desperate. She felt it in her chest, her throat, behind her ribs. Felt his wolf calling to hers. Felt the answer rising before she could stop it. She looked away first. Had to. Before someone noticed. The king took his seat. Everyone else followed. Servants moved forward. Liora's hands were steady as she lifted the wine pitcher. Muscle memory. Mechanical. She poured for the king. For the nobles. Worked her way down the table. Reached Rylan. His goblet was already full. She knew because she'd watched another servant pour for him. But he picked it up, took a deliberate sip, drained half. Set it down. Waiting. Liora stepped forward. Filled his glass. The wine looked like blood in candlelight. "Thank you." His voice was low. Meant only for her. She said nothing. Moved to Sienna. "Finally," Sienna said, not quite under her breath. "I was beginning to think the service here was lacking." A noble across the table laughed. Liora poured. Didn't react. Finished her rounds and retreated to the wall. The meal began. Conversation flowed louder tonight. Wine loosened tongues. Laughter came easier. Halfway through the third course, the king stood. The hall quieted. "My friends," Dominic said, voice carrying effortlessly, "we gather tonight to celebrate an alliance that will shape the future of both our peoples. Lord Rylan Cross of the Northern Territories has agreed to a union that will bring prosperity and peace to us all." Applause. Polite. Scripted. "Lord Rylan," the king continued, "please stand. And your lovely bride-to-be." They stood. Sienna beamed. Rylan's expression was pleasant, fixed. His hand found hers. She laced their fingers together. Liora's wolf whimpered. "A toast," someone called out. Goblets raised. Liora watched from the wall as 45 people drank to the health and happiness of a couple that made her insides twist. The king sat. Conversation resumed. But something had shifted. The evening took on a performance quality, everyone playing their part, hitting their marks. Liora moved through it like a ghost. Clear plates. Bring new ones. Pour wine. Disappear. Between courses, she stood near the serving entrance. Another servant joined her. A woman, maybe 30, wolf by the scent. They'd never spoken before. Palace rules discouraged it. "You're the new one," the woman said quietly. "The one he bought at auction." Liora nodded. "Word of advice. Don't stare at the alpha." Her blood went cold. "I don't." "Yes, you do. So does he. And the king notices everything." The woman glanced toward the head table. "I've been here 2 years. I've seen what happens when he gets jealous. Don't give him a reason." She walked away before Liora could respond. The warning sat heavy in her chest. She forced herself to look anywhere but at Rylan for the rest of the meal. At the tapestries, the candles, the servants moving efficiently through their routines. But she felt him watching her, felt it like fingers trailing down her spine. Dessert came. Some elaborate confection with spun sugar and berries. Nobles cooed over it. Liora cleared empty plates, carried them toward the kitchen entrance. The corridor outside the hall was dimmer, quieter. She balanced the stack carefully, grateful for the momentary escape. Footsteps behind her. She turned. Rylan stood 10 feet away. Alone. The bond surged. Her wolf lunged forward, desperate. She stumbled back, plates rattling. "Don't." His voice was rough, strained. "Please don't run. You shouldn't be here." The words came out harsh. "Defensive." "I know." He took a step closer, stopped. His hands flexed at his sides like he was physically restraining himself. "I needed to. I had to make sure you were. I'm fine." Lie. Complete lie. She was fracturing, splintering, held together by sheer will. "You're not." Another step. The space between them charged. Electric. "I can feel it. Everything you're feeling. The bond. Don't say it." Her voice cracked. "Don't you dare say that word when you're in there celebrating your engagement to someone else." Pain flickered across his face. "You think I want this? You think I chose? I don't care what you chose." The plates shook in her hands. She set them down hard on a side table before she dropped them. "You made your choice." She's sitting in there wearing white and smiling like she won something. Maybe she did. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. Liora's nails bit into her palms. "You're alpha. You have power. Resources. You could've." "Could've what?" Rylan's voice rose. "Started a war? My father made an alliance with Sienna's family before I even knew you existed. A blood oath. Breaking it would fracture the entire northern territory. Hundreds of wolves depend on that alliance for survival. And I depend on you." The words ripped out of her. Raw. Honest. "My mate. The person who's supposed to." She couldn't finish. Couldn't say it without breaking completely. Rylan closed the distance between them. Fast. Sudden. He stopped inches away, close enough that she could feel heat radiating off him. Close enough that the bond screamed for her to close the gap. "I'm trying." His voice dropped to something desperate. "I'm trying to find a way. But I need time. And you need to survive until I figure this out." "Survive." She laughed. "Bitter. That's what I'm doing. Serving wine to the man who bought me while my mate celebrates his engagement. I'm surviving beautifully." "Liora, how did you know my name?" He froze. "I never told you." Her eyes narrowed. "And they didn't announce it at the auction. So how?" Footsteps. Multiple sets. Coming from the hall. Rylan stepped back. The loss of proximity hurt physically. "I have to go." "Wait." But he was already moving, slipping back toward the hall entrance. The footsteps grew louder. 2 servants emerged, carrying trays. They glanced at Liora, then away. She picked up her plates, carried them to the kitchen. Her hands shook the entire way. The rest of the evening passed in fragments. She served, cleared, avoided looking at the head table. When the meal finally ended, when nobles filtered toward other entertainments, she retreated to her room without being dismissed. No one stopped her. The door locked behind her. She leaned against it, breathing hard. The stone floor was cold under her bare feet. She'd left her shoes by the serving station. Didn't care. Sleep came hard. When it finally did, she dreamed of running through forests she'd never seen, chasing a wolf she couldn't catch. She woke to rough hands dragging her upright. Guards. 2 of them. Human. Armed. Up, one said. King wants to see you. Terror spiked through her. What? Why? Not our job to ask questions. They pulled her into the corridor. She was still in her servant's dress, bare feet slapping against stone. Other doors stayed closed. No one helped. No one watched. They took her deeper into the palace. Parts she'd never seen. Wider corridors. Better lighting. Expensive art on the walls. They stopped at double doors. Carved wood. Gold handles. One guard knocked. Enter, came the king's voice. They pushed her inside. The room was an office. Rich. Comfortable. Bookshelves lined the walls. A desk dominated the center, papers scattered across its surface. A fire crackled in a massive hearth. King Dominic stood by the window. He didn't turn immediately. "Leave us," he said. The guards withdrew. The door closed. Locked. Liora's heart hammered. She stayed near the door, every instinct screaming run. The king finally turned. He looked relaxed, almost friendly. That made it worse. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked. "No, your majesty. Don't lie." He walked toward his desk, leaned against it. "You're a terrible liar. It's actually refreshing." She said nothing. "Lord Rylan," Dominic continued, "Alpha of the Northern Territories, powerful, wealthy, engaged to a lovely young woman. And yet—" he paused, tilted his head. "He can't seem to stop looking at you." Her mouth went dry. "At first I thought I was imagining it, a trick of the light. But then I watched more carefully. The way his eyes follow you, the way you avoid looking at him, the tension between you." He smiled. "Tell me, Liora, what am I missing?" The name hit her like a slap. She'd never told him her name either. "Nothing, your majesty. I'm just a servant." He picked up a paper from his desk, studied it. "I did some research. After I bought you, your father is Beta of the Crescent Ridge Pack. Sold you for 40,000 gold to cover their debts. Quite desperate, really." Anger flared. She crushed it. "But here's what's interesting." He set the paper down. "Your father didn't just sell you randomly. He had offers, lower offers, from other humans. He chose my auction specifically, almost like he wanted you far away from something, or someone." Her blood turned to ice. "Lord Rylan has been searching for someone for the past 2 years. A girl from a family that owed his father a debt. A promise made his father arranged, then broke when a better offer came along." Dominic's smile widened. "That girl wouldn't happen to be you, would it?" Silence stretched. Heavy. Damning. "Your Majesty. Don't." He pushed off the desk. Walked toward her. Slow. Deliberate. "I'm not angry. In fact, I'm impressed. The Alpha came here under the guise of negotiations, but he was really looking for you. Found you chained on my auction block. Couldn't claim you without exposing his father's broken oath." He stopped in front of her. That must have been devastating for him. Liora forced her voice steady. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. The mate bond. It's real, isn't it? I've heard stories. Never seen it myself. But the way he looks at you. Dominic reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. She flinched. The way you're fighting not to run to him right now. It's quite the dilemma. Please. I'm not going to hurt you. His hand dropped. Quite the opposite. You're valuable. More valuable than I realized. An alpha's fated mate, collared and serving in my palace. The symbolism alone is exquisite. What do you want? Your cooperation. He walked back to his desk, poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter. Lord Rylan will leave soon. His engagement celebration is over. He'll return north to marry his politically advantageous bride. And you'll stay here. With me. No. Yes. The word was iron. Because if you try to escape, if he tries to take you, I'll invoke every treaty, every alliance, every legal right I have. I'll start a war that will destroy both your peoples. And I'll make sure everyone knows it's because an alpha couldn't control himself over one wolf. The threat hung in the air. Clear. Undeniable. But if you behave, he continued, voice softening, if you serve quietly and don't cause trouble, I'll make sure you're comfortable. Federal safe. I'm not a monster, Liora. I'm a pragmatist. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The room tilted. Do we have an understanding? What choice did she have? Yes, Your Majesty. Good. He smiled. Genuine this time. You can go. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be a busy day. Lord Rylan departs at noon. I expect you'll want to say goodbye. The cruelty in that statement was casual, effortless. The guards appeared, unlocked the door, led her back through the corridors, back to her small stone room, back to her cage disguised as employment. The door locked. Liora sank onto the cot, pressed her hands against her mouth to keep the scream inside. The king knew. He knew everything, and he was going to use it like a weapon, carving her and Rylan apart piece by piece because he could, because they were his. Dawn came grey and cold. She didn't sleep, just lay there, staring at the too-high window, watching the sky change colors. At 8, they came for her, put her in the grey dress, led her to the great hall. Breakfast was subdued. Nobles nursing hangovers. Quieter conversation. Rylan and Sienna sat at the head table, both dressed for travel. Sienna looked radiant, rested, happy. Rylan looked like he hadn't slept either. Liora poured wine, cleared plates, moved through her routines mechanically. At 11:30, the king stood. Lord Rylan, Lady Sienna. It has been our honor to host you. Pleasantries. Formalities. Liora stopped listening. The nobles filtered out. Carriages waited in the courtyard outside. She could hear horses stamping, drivers calling to each other. Rylan and Sienna moved toward the exit. Liora stood against the wall, forgotten. At the threshold, Rylan stopped, turned. His eyes found hers across the emptying hall. The bond pulled. Desperate. Pleading. She gave the smallest shake of her head. Warning. The king was watching from his position near the head table, watching them both with that satisfied smile. Rylan's jaw clenched. Then Sienna tugged his arm, and he turned away. Gone. The hall emptied. Servants cleaned. Liora helped, grateful for the distraction. But that night, locked in her room, she felt the bond stretch thinner, felt Rylan moving farther away with every mile between them, and she realized with sick certainty that the king was right. She was valuable, which meant she wasn't going anywhere. The lock on her door wasn't just metal. It was politics. Power. The threat of war. It was a cage made of consequences. And there was no key. Chapter 3. 3 weeks passed like a slow bleed. Liora moved through the palace like a shadow. Serve. Clean. Obey. The routine became armor, something to hide behind while her insides hollowed out. The mate bond stretched thin across the distance between her and Rylan. Still there, always there, but faint, like trying to hear a voice through water. Some mornings she woke up and forgot for half a second where she was. Then the grey walls reminded her. The locked door. The smell of stone and dampness. The king kept his word. She was fed. Given clean clothes. Not harmed. But she wasn't safe. Safety required the possibility of escape. She had none. The other wolves in the palace kept their distance. She understood why. Survival meant not drawing attention. Forming attachments was dangerous when anyone could be sold, punished, or disappeared on a king's whim. But on the 23rd day, everything shifted. Liora was scrubbing floors in the East Wing, punishment duty for dropping a goblet during breakfast, when she heard raised voices. Male. Angry. Coming from a room 3 doors down. She kept scrubbing. Not her business. Never her business. Absolutely unacceptable. Your Majesty, I assure you. A crash. Glass shattering. Liora's hands stilled on the brush. The door flew open. A man stumbled out, human, middle-aged, wearing expensive robes now splattered with wine. His face was red. Terrified. Behind him, King Dominic appeared in the doorway. Calm. Smiling. I trust we understand each other now, Chancellor. The man nodded frantically. Fled down the corridor. The king's eyes swept the hall. Found Liora on her knees, scrub brush in hand. You. Come here. Her stomach dropped. She stood slowly. Approached. Kept her head down. Clean that up. He gestured to the room behind him. And be thorough. I have important guests arriving this evening. I want everything perfect. Yes, Your Majesty. He walked past her. His footsteps echoed away down the corridor. Liora entered the room. It was a parlor. Elegant. Ruined. Wine soaked into an expensive rug. Glass glittered across the floor. A chair was overturned. Papers scattered across a desk. She could see the king's seal on several. She found cleaning supplies in a side closet. Started with the glass. Careful. Methodical. Her mind wandered while her hands worked. Important guests. The king rarely entertained. Most nobles came during designated seasons. Unscheduled visits usually meant something significant. She was soaking up wine from the rug when she noticed the papers on the desk. Closer now. Close enough to see words. She shouldn't look. Should finish and leave. She looked. The top paper showed a map. The Northern Territories. Rylan's lands. Red marks indicated. What? Borders? Resources? She lifted the corner of the paper. Beneath it, another document. This one typed. Official. Therefore agree that upon completion of the marriage contract between Lord Rylan Cross and Lady Sienna Hartwell, the following territories will be ceded to the Crown in exchange for. Footsteps in the corridor. Liora dropped the paper. Grabbed her cleaning rag. Turned back to the rug just as a servant appeared in the doorway. You're needed in the kitchens, the girl said. Now. Liora gathered her supplies. Followed the girl out. Her mind raced. A marriage contract. Territory exchange. The king was negotiating something with Rylan's people. Using the wedding as leverage. Did Rylan know? The kitchens were chaos. Preparation for tonight's dinner had started hours ago. Cooks shouted orders. Servants rushed between stations. The head cook grabbed Liora the moment she entered. You. Carrots. Peel and dice. Fast. She worked. The rhythm helped quiet her thoughts. Around her, conversations flowed. Heard it's the Blackwood delegation. About time, if you ask me. 3 alphas and their entourages. Liora's knife slipped. She caught it. Forced her hands steady. 3 alphas. Here. Tonight. What's the dinner about? She asked the girl working next to her. The girl glanced around. Lowered her voice. Trade negotiations. The king's trying to form new alliances. Wolves from the Western Territories. They're not happy about Lord Rylan's wedding. Something about broken agreements. What kind of agreements? Don't know. Don't want to know. But I heard. She leaned closer. I heard one of the alphas is claiming Lord Rylan's father cheated them out of land rights. They're here to make sure the king doesn't side with the Northern Pack. Politics. Wolf politics layered on top of human politics. A web of alliances and betrayals, so complex Liora's head spun trying to track it. And she was trapped in the middle. The afternoon bled into evening. Liora was pulled from kitchen duty and sent back to the great hall. More servants needed. The dinner was bigger than usual. She dressed in her grey uniform, checked her reflection in a cracked mirror. Pale. Tired. Her hair pulled back tight enough to hurt. Good. Pain kept her focused. The great hall had been transformed. More candles. Fresh flowers. The head table extended to accommodate extra seats. Everything gleamed. Servants took their positions. Liora stood against the east wall, wine pitcher ready. The bell chimed. Nobles entered first. Then the king, wearing black and gold tonight. His crown caught the light. Then the wolves. Liora knew them instantly. The way they moved, confident, predatory, aware. 3 men, all large, all radiating the particular authority that came with alpha status. Behind them came their people. Maybe 20 total. They weren't trying to blend with humans. They wore their power openly. The king greeted them warmly. False warmth. Political warmth. Alpha Cormac. Alpha Desmond. Alpha Thorn. Welcome. Thorn. Different Thorn than Rylan? She studied him. Older, maybe 50, grey threading his dark hair. His eyes swept the room. Calculating. They took their seats. The meal began. Liora poured wine. Moved through her routine. But she listened. Unfortunate situation with the Northern Territories, Alpha Cormac was saying. Broad-shouldered. Scarred hands. Indeed. The king cut into his meat. Though I understand congratulations are in order. Lord Rylan's wedding approaches. A wedding built on stolen promises. Alpha Thorn's voice was cold. His father made agreements with several packs. Broke them all when the Hartwell family offered more resources. Politics often requires difficult choices. The king smiled. Diplomatic. Empty. Choices have consequences. Alpha Desmond leaned back in his chair. Younger than the other 2. Restless energy. The Northern Territories think they can dominate trade routes. Force smaller packs into submission. We're here to ensure you understand there are other options. I'm always interested in options. Dominic sipped his wine. Tell me more. The conversation shifted. Trade agreements. Territory rights. Resource sharing. Liora only half followed. Her attention snagged on Alpha Thorn. Something about him felt familiar. The way he held himself. The cadence of his speech. Then he turned to request more wine, and she saw his eyes fully. Pale green. Almost grey. Rylan's eyes. Her heart stopped. Thorn. Rylan's last name. This was his father. The man who'd made promises and broken them. The man who'd sold her to save an alliance. Her hands shook. Wine sloshed in the pitcher. Careful, girl. Alpha Cormac's voice. Not unkind. Just observing. She steadied herself. Poured for him. Moved down the line. Reached Thorn. He looked up at her. Direct. Assessing. No recognition in his eyes. Why would there be? She was nobody. Just another wolf he'd bartered away. She poured. Retreated. The meal continued. Hours of political maneuvering disguised as dinner conversation. The king was skilled, playing sides against each other, offering nothing concrete, collecting information. Between courses, Liora stood near the serving entrance. Another wolf servant approached her. Male, younger, with nervous energy. "You're the one the king bought from Beta Voss," he whispered. "Yes. Did you know Alpha Thorn was the one who arranged it?" Her blood went cold. "What?" "The auction. Your father came to him first. Desperate. Needed money. Thorn gave him enough gold to cover his debts if he got you away from the northern territories." Quietly. The world tilted. Why would he? Because you were promised to his son, and when Thorn broke that promise, having you nearby was inconvenient. The boy glanced toward the head table. Better to sell you to a human king than risk his son actually claiming you. Liora's nails bit into her palms. The betrayal was layered. Her father sold her. Thorn arranged it. All to protect an alliance built on lies. "How do you know this?" she managed. "I was there. When they made the deal. Thorn's people don't always remember we have ears." He faded back into the shadows. Liora stood frozen. Everything clicked into place. The auction wasn't random. Her father didn't just need money. He was paid to get rid of her. By Rylan's father. The man sitting 20 feet away, discussing trade agreements like he hadn't destroyed lives for political convenience. Rage built in her chest. Hot. Consuming. Her wolf surged forward, desperate to shift, to attack too. No. She crushed it down, breathing hard. If she lost control now, she'd be killed. Or worse. But the knowledge burned. The dinner finally ended. Nobles dispersed. The 3 alphas remained, moving with the king toward a private parlor for further discussions. Servants cleaned. Liora helped mechanically. Her mind churned. She had to tell someone. Had to get word to Rylan that his father was here. That he'd arranged her sale. That. Liora. She turned. The king stood in the parlor doorway. "Join us, please." Not a request. She followed him into the room. The 3 alphas sat in comfortable chairs, drinks in hand. They looked up as she entered. "Gentlemen," the king said, "allow me to introduce my newest acquisition, Liora Voss, purchased from Beta Gregor of the Crescent Ridge Pack." Alpha Thorn's expression didn't change. No surprise. No guilt. Interesting. Alpha Cormac studied her. Pure bloodline. Impeccable. The king gestured for Liora to stand in the center of the room. "She's been exemplary. Obedient. Skilled. I'm sure." Alpha Desmond's tone held amusement. "Though I'm curious why you'd call her in for a business meeting." The king smiled. "Because she's relevant to our discussion. You see, Liora has a rather unique connection to the Northern Territories." Thorn's eyes narrowed slightly. She was promised to Lord Rylan Cross, his fated mate, arranged by his father years ago. Dominic watched the Alpha's reactions. Then that promise was broken, and she conveniently ended up here. Silence. Heavy. "Your Majesty," Thorn said carefully, "I'm not sure what." "Don't." The king's voice cut like glass. "I did my research. The moment I realized why Lord Rylan couldn't stop watching her, I investigated, found the whole sordid tale. A promised mate, discarded for better political optics. Her father paid handsomely to remove the evidence." Alpha Cormac laughed. Sharp. Bitter. Well, that's certainly interesting, isn't it? The king moved to the drink cart, poured himself whiskey. It raises questions about the stability of any agreements made with the Northern Territories. If Alpha Thorn breaks promises this significant, why should we trust future negotiations? Thorn's jaw clenched. That was a private matter. Private matters become public when they affect international relations. Dominic sipped his drink. Lord Rylan came here searching for her. Couldn't claim her without exposing his father's betrayal. Now he's marrying someone else while his true mate serves wine in my palace. It's quite the scandal. What do you want? Alpha Desmond asked bluntly. Honesty. Transparency. If we're going to negotiate trade agreements, I need to know my partners are trustworthy. The king looked at Thorn. You broke an oath to your own son. What assurances do I have you won't break agreements with me? The room crackled with tension. Liora stood perfectly still, heart hammering. She was a weapon. The king was using her as leverage against Thorn, against the Northern Territories, against whatever political games he was playing. I did what was necessary for my pack's survival, Thorn said finally. Voice hard. As we all do. The king smiled. But survival requires trust, and trust requires proof. He turned to Liora. Tell them what it felt like when your father sold you, when Alpha Thorn's gold changed hands to remove an inconvenience. She should stay quiet, should play the obedient servant. But rage won. It felt like being erased, she said, voice steady, cold, like my life mattered less than politics, like I was a problem to solve instead of a person. Alpha Thorn's expression flickered, something that might have been shame. And now, the king prompted, now I'm still a problem, still property, just a different owner. She met Thorn's eyes. At least King Dominic doesn't pretend it's for my own good. Silence. Then Alpha Cormac laughed again. She's got spirit. I'll give you that. Indeed. The king waved dismissively. You may go, Liora. She left, walked down the corridor on shaking legs. Heard voices rise behind her. Argument, anger, accusation. Good. Let them fight. Let Thorn's carefully constructed alliances crack. Let him feel a fraction of what he'd done to her. To Rylan. She reached her room. The door locked behind her. She pressed her back against it, slid down to the floor. The rage was fading, leaving behind exhaustion, grief. Rylan didn't know his father was here, didn't know the king was using her as a political weapon. He was somewhere up north, preparing for a wedding to a woman he didn't love, believing he was protecting her by staying away. He was wrong. She wasn't safer with distance. She was being used. Her existence, her bond with Rylan, her very presence in this palace. It was all ammunition for whatever game the king was playing. And she had no way to warn him. Hours passed. She didn't sleep. Just sat against the door, listening to footsteps in the corridor. Voices. Doors opening and closing. Near midnight, her door unlocked. She scrambled to her feet. A guard stood outside. The king wants you in the East Tower. Now. Fear spiked. Why? Move. She followed him. Upstairs. Through corridors she'd never seen. Higher into the palace. The East Tower was old. Stone walls rougher here. Colder. They stopped at a door. The guard unlocked it, pushed her inside. The room was circular. Windows showed the city below, lights scattered like fallen stars. A desk sat against one wall. Bookshelves. A single chair. And standing by the window, Alpha Thorn. The door closed behind her. Locked. She backed up instinctively. He didn't move. Just looked at her, weighing, assessing. I'm not going to hurt you, he said finally. Forgive me if I don't trust that. A muscle in his jaw twitched. Fair. Silence stretched. Liora's wolf growled low. Alert. Ready. I didn't know, Thorn said suddenly, that you were Rylan's mate. Not when I made the arrangement with your father. Liar. It's true. He turned from the window, face harder in the lamplight. I knew about the promise. The arrangement my father made with yours when you were children. But I didn't know about the bond. Didn't realize it had already formed. Would it have mattered? He was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. I'd like to think so. But politics. Politics. She spat the word. That's always the excuse. Politics required breaking your word. Politics required selling me. Politics required destroying your son's chance at happiness. My son will be fine. The Hartwell alliance secures our territory for generations. Your son is miserable. The words tore out of her. I felt it. Every day he was here. The bond between us screaming while he pretended I didn't exist because you taught him duty matters more than everything else. Thorn flinched. Why am I here? Liora demanded. What do you want? Information. He moved to the desk, pulled out a folded paper. The king is playing a dangerous game, using you to undermine my credibility, driving wedges between wolf packs. I need to know his endgame, so ask him. He won't tell me, but he talks around you. Servants hear things, see things. Thorn held out the paper. I need you to watch. Listen. Report back anything useful. She stared at him. You want me to spy for you? After what you did? I want you to help me stop whatever the king is planning. Because if he succeeds in fracturing wolf alliances, we'll all suffer, including you. I'm already suffering. It can get worse. His voice dropped. Much worse. The king collects wolves for a reason. He's experimenting, testing, trying to find weaknesses. 3 wolves have disappeared from this palace in the last month. Nobody knows where they went. Ice ran down her spine. What kind of experiments? The kind that don't leave survivors to talk about it. Thorn took a step closer. Help me, please. Not for me. For Rylan. For all the wolves trapped here. She wanted to refuse. Wanted to throw his request back in his face. But he wasn't wrong. The king was dangerous. And she'd seen too much to pretend otherwise. If I do this, she said slowly, I want something in return. Name it. Get word to Rylan. Tell him what's happening. Tell him his father is here. Tell him. Her voice cracked. Tell him I understand. Why he couldn't claim me. Why he had to leave. Thorn's expression softened. Barely. I'll tell him. Swear it. On your alpha oath. He hesitated. Then, I swear it. On my oath as alpha, I'll get word to my son. She took the paper, unfolded it. A list of questions. Things to watch for. Signs of specific activities. How do I contact you? She asked. I'll find you. 3 days. Same time. He moved toward the door. Knocked twice. It unlocked. He paused in the doorway. Looked back at her. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I am sorry. About all of it. Then he was gone. Liora stood alone in the circular room, paper clutched in her hand, and wondered what fresh hell she'd just agreed to. But somewhere deep down, beneath the fear and exhaustion and rage, something stirred. Purpose. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was fighting back. Chapter 4. The next 3 days crawled by like wounded animals. Liora moved through the palace with new eyes. Every conversation overheard became significant. Every document left carelessly on a table became potential intelligence. Every locked door raised questions. She was careful, quiet, asked no direct questions, just watched and listened while scrubbing floors, serving meals, existing in that invisible space servants occupied. What she learned terrified her. The king wasn't just collecting wolves. He was categorizing them. She found a ledger in the library, left open while a scholar took notes nearby. Columns of names, ages, pack affiliations, and next to each name, a series of codes she didn't understand. But 3 names had red marks through them, the 3 wolves who'd disappeared. She memorized what she could, kept moving before anyone noticed her lingering. In the kitchens, she overheard 2 guards talking about the lower levels. Area's servants weren't allowed. They mentioned sounds, howling that echoed up through the stone at night. One guard laughed nervously. The other told him to shut up. And during dinner service on the second night, she watched the king and Alpha Thorn. Their conversation was polite, diplomatic, but tension crackled underneath. The other 2 alphas, Cormac and Desmond, watched everything with predatory awareness. They were waiting for something, all of them. On the third night, Liora was pulled from regular duties and sent to clean the king's private study. Unusual. Those rooms were typically handled by senior staff. She went anyway, had no choice. The study was exactly what she'd expected. Opulent. Books everywhere. A massive desk covered in papers. Maps on the walls showing territories across the continent. She started dusting. Slow. Methodical. Giving herself time to look. One map caught her attention. The Northern Territories. Rylan's lands. But this map had markings she hadn't seen before. Red circles around specific locations. Notes in the margins. Dates. She moved closer. Squinted at the writing. Project Severance. Phase 1 completion. 2 weeks post-wedding. Her blood went cold. Wedding. Rylan's wedding. 2 weeks away now. What was Project Severance? She grabbed a piece of scrap paper from the trash bin. Sketched the map quickly. Marked the locations. Folded it small and tucked it into her sleeve. Footsteps in the corridor. She spun back to dusting. The door opened. King Dominic entered with another man. Human, older, wearing robes that marked him as some kind of scholar or advisor. Absolutely certain the timing will work, the king was saying. Yes, your majesty. The wedding creates the perfect distraction. All eyes on the ceremony. Nobody watching the borders. And the wolves in the Western Territories? They won't interfere. Alpha Thorn has them convinced you're on their side. By the time they realize what's happened, it'll be too late. The king noticed Liora. His expression didn't change. Girl. Out. She left quickly, heart hammering. Walked down the corridor trying to look normal while her mind raced. The wedding was a distraction. Something was happening at the borders. And Thorn was being played, convincing other alphas the king was an ally while something else unfolded. She needed to tell him. Now. But she had to wait. Hours until midnight. Until their agreed meeting time. The evening dragged. She served dinner. Cleared plates. Avoided looking at Thorn even though he sat at the head table with the king. They were laughing together. Like friends. Like conspirators. Finally, midnight approached. Liora slipped away from her room during a guard change. Moved through empty corridors toward the East Tower. The palace was quieter at night. Dangerous. Being caught out of quarters meant punishment. She didn't care. She reached the tower. Climbed the stairs. The circular room's door was unlocked. Alpha Thorn stood by the window. Alone. She entered. Closed the door. Well, he said without turning. What have you learned? She pulled out the sketch. Explained what she'd overheard. The project. The timeline. The distraction. Thorn's expression darkened with each word. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. "He's planning an invasion," he said finally. Voice cold. Flat. "What?" "Those marked locations. They're weak points in our border defenses. Lightly guarded because of the wedding. Everyone will be at the ceremony or celebrating." He crumpled the paper. "He's going to attack while we're distracted. Take territory. Blame it on rogue elements. By the time we respond, he'll have fortified positions." Horror washed over her. "But the other alphas, Cormac and Desmond, they're here to form alliances. They're here to be witnesses, to report back to the Western Territories that the king is trustworthy, that wolf cooperation with humans is possible." Thorn's hands curled into fists. "They'll go home singing his praises while he stabs us in the back. You have to warn them. Warn everyone." With what proof? A sketch from a servant? Overheard conversation? He shook his head. "The king will deny everything. Call it wolf paranoia. Use it to drive more wedges between packs. So what do? Thorn turned to face her fully. "We get proof. Concrete. Undeniable. Something that exposes his plan before the wedding." "How?" "The lower levels. You said guards mentioned them. That's where his real work happens. Where he's experimenting. Where the disappeared wolves went." His eyes were hard. Determined. "We need to get down there. Document what he's doing. Use it as leverage. That's suicide. It's heavily guarded. Not tonight." Thorn moved to the desk. Pulled out a schedule. "Tomorrow night there's a banquet. Most of the guard will be reassigned for security. The lower levels will have minimal coverage for 4 hours. You're insane." "Probably." He looked at her. "But I can't do it alone. I'm being watched. Every move tracked. But you're just a servant. Invisible. You can access areas I can't. And if we're caught, then we're both dead. Simple. Honest. But if we do nothing, hundreds of wolves die when the king's forces attack, including my son's pack, including everyone in the Northern Territories." Leora's wolf stirred. Torn. This was dangerous. Reckless. Everything could go wrong. But Thorn was right. Doing nothing meant death anyway. Just slower. More certain. "What's the plan?" she asked. Relief flickered across his face. "Tomorrow night during the banquet, you'll slip away. I'll create a distraction, argument with Cormac, something public. While everyone's focused on that, you take the servants' passages down. There's an entrance behind the kitchens that connects to the lower levels." "How do you know?" "I've been mapping the palace since I arrived. Old stone. Standard construction. There are always passages." He handed her another paper. "This shows the route. Memorize it. Burn it." She studied the map. Committed it to memory. "What am I looking for down there?" "Anything that proves what he's doing. Documents. Equipment. The missing wolves if they're still alive." His voice dropped. "And Liora? If you find them, you can't help them. Not yet. Just document and get out. That's necessary. Saving 3 wolves versus saving hundreds? The math is cold but clear." She hated that he was right. "One more thing." Thorn pulled something from his pocket. A small device. Communication crystal. Old wolf magic. Rare. Press your thumb here, speak, and I'll hear it. Works one direction only. If something goes wrong, tell me. I'll create a bigger distraction. Give you time to escape." She took it. The crystal was warm, pulsing slightly. "You swore you'd get word to Rylan. Have you?" "I sent a runner 2 days ago. He should reach the Northern Territories by tomorrow evening." Thorn's expression softened slightly. I told him everything. What you're doing. Where you are. That you understand. Something in her chest loosened. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We might both die tomorrow. She almost laughed. Comforting. I'm not here to comfort. I'm here to fight. He moved toward the door. Paused. My son is lucky to have you as his mate. I hope he knows that. He will. When this is over. When we're both still alive to tell him. Thorn left. Liora waited 5 minutes. Then slipped back through empty corridors to her room. She burned the map. Watched the paper curl and blacken. Memorized every turn, every passage, every exit. Then she lay down and tried to sleep. Failed completely. The next day moved like honey. Thick. Slow. Every hour stretched. Liora performed her duties mechanically. Served lunch. Cleaned. Prepared for the evening's banquet. The great hall was transformed again. More elaborate than before. A celebration, apparently. The king was honoring the visiting alphas. Strengthening alliances. Lies. All lies. Liora dressed in her grey uniform. Took her position. The hall filled with nobles and wolves. Laughter. Wine. False cheer. The king entered with the 3 alphas. All smiling. Brothers in diplomacy. The meal began. Liora poured wine. Cleared plates. Waited. 2 hours in, Thorn stood abruptly. Ridiculous. The hall quieted. Alpha Thorn. The king's voice held concern. Perfectly acted. The Western Territories have no claim to the river routes. Thorn's voice rose. Angry. Alpha Cormac, your people agreed to share access 2 decades ago. Our people agreed under different terms. Cormac stood too. Terms your pack violated. We violated nothing. The argument escalated. Voices rising. Other alphas joining in. The king tried to mediate. Guards moved closer. Nobles watched with fascinated horror. Perfect distraction. Liora slipped toward the serving entrance. Another servant glanced at her. She mouthed supplies and gestured vaguely. The girl nodded, already focused back on the drama. Liora moved through the corridors. Behind the kitchens. Found the passage exactly where Thorn's map showed. A small door, unmarked, half hidden behind shelving. She opened it. Stairs descended into darkness. She pulled out the communication crystal, tucked it in her sleeve where she could reach it quickly, then started down. The stairs were steep, old. The air grew colder with each step, damper, smelling of stone and something else. Something organic. Wrong. She reached the bottom. A corridor stretched ahead. Torches burning low. Iron doors lined both sides. She moved forward. Silent. Her wolf senses extended. Listening. Smelling. Behind one door. Breathing. Labored. Pained. She tried the handle. Locked. Moved on. The next door. Another lock. But she heard voices beyond. Human. Speaking low. Subject 3 showing resistance to silver exposure. Increase the dosage. Not sure that's wise, the last one. Liora's stomach turned. She pressed her ear against the door. Metal scraping. A whimper. Cut short. She forced herself to move. Keep going. Document. Don't engage. The corridor opened into a larger space. A laboratory of some kind. Tables. Equipment. Vials of liquid. And on the far wall, cages. 3 of them. 3 wolves. Transformed. Barely conscious. Silver chains wrapped around them. Burns marking their fur. Their skin underneath. The missing wolves. Horror choked her. She wanted to run to them, free them. But Thorn's words echoed. Can't help them. Not yet. Document. She looked around frantically, found papers on a table, grabbed them, scanned quickly. Project Severance. Developing silver-resistant restraints for wolf population control. Phase 1. Exposure testing. Phase 2. Behavioral modification through pain conditioning. Phase 3. Application during territorial acquisition. Her hands shook. This wasn't just about invasion. The king was researching how to control wolves permanently, using torture to develop methods of domination. She folded the papers, tucked them in her dress. Footsteps, coming from the corridor she'd entered through. Panic spiked. She looked around. No other exits. Just the laboratory and the corridor and a ventilation grate. High on the wall. Barely large enough. She climbed onto a table, pried the grate open, squeezed through. It scraped her sides, tore her dress. She didn't care. The shaft beyond was narrow, dark. She crawled forward, away from the laboratory, the metal cold against her hands. Behind her, voices. Someone was here. Papers are missing. Find them. Now. She crawled faster. The shaft branched. She took the right path, then left. No idea where she was going. Just away. The crystal in her sleeve pressed against her skin. She stopped, pulled it out, pressed her thumb. Thorn. They know. Papers taken. Being hunted. No response. One-way communication. He'd heard. That was enough. She kept moving. The shaft opened into another grate. She kicked it loose. Dropped into a storage room. Supplies. Linens. A servant's area. She stood. Adjusted her dress. Hid the papers better. Forced her breathing to slow. A door across the room. She tried it. Unlocked. Opened into a corridor she recognized. Near the servants' quarters. She stepped out. Walked normally. Just a servant. Going about her duties. Alarms started ringing. Loud. Piercing. Throughout the palace. Guards poured into corridors. Shouting. Searching. Liora kept walking. Head down. Invisible. A guard grabbed her arm. You. Where were you? Linen closet. Getting supplies for the banquet. She showed him the torn hem of her dress. Caught it on a shelf. He studied her. Suspicious. Then another guard called him. Found something in the lower levels. He released her. Ran toward the call. Liora made it to her room. The door locked behind her. She sank to the floor, breathing hard. The papers crinkled against her skin. Evidence. Proof of everything. Now she just had to survive long enough to use it. Hours passed. The alarm stopped. Footsteps continued throughout the night. Searches. The palace on lockdown. Near dawn, her door unlocked. Alpha Thorn slipped inside. His face was grim. Did you? She pulled out the papers. Handed them to him. He read. His expression darkened with each line. This is enough. More than enough. What now? Now I take this to Cormac and Desmond. Show them what their ally is really doing. Force them to see the truth. He folded the papers carefully. The king will try to spin it. Call you a thief. A liar. But physical evidence is harder to dismiss. He'll kill me for this. He'll try. Thorn met her eyes. But you won't be here. Tomorrow morning, before dawn, you're leaving with my delegation. We're departing early. Citing urgent business. You'll be disguised as one of my servants. He won't allow it. He won't have a choice. By tonight, all 3 Alpha delegations will know what he's doing. We'll threaten to expose him publicly. Human-wolf relations would collapse. He needs those relationships. Thorn's smile was cold. So he'll let you go. Quietly. To avoid worse scandal. And the wolves still here? The ones in the cages. Once you're safe, once this evidence is public, we'll negotiate their release. Use international pressure. The king will have no choice but to comply or face economic sanctions from every wolf territory. It wasn't perfect, but it was a chance. What about Rylan? The question came out smaller than she intended. You'll see him soon. I promise. Thorn moved toward the door. Paused. What you did tonight was brave. Stupid, but brave. My son chose well. He didn't choose. The bond chose. The bond brings 2 people together. How they handle it is still a choice. He opened the door. Be ready at dawn. Dress warmly. It's a long journey north. He left. Liora sat on her cot. The papers were gone. The evidence safe with Thorn. The missing wolves would be rescued. She was getting out. She should feel relief. Victory. Instead she felt exhausted. Hollow. The mate bond hummed. Distant but present. Rylan was still far away. Still preparing to marry someone else. Even if she reached the Northern Territories, even if she survived this nightmare, nothing fundamental had changed. He was still promised to Sienna. Still bound by duty. Still trapped in the same political web that had ensnared them both. But at least she'd be free of this palace. These stone walls. This cage. At least she'd be alive. Dawn came grey and cold. Liora dressed in layers. Everything she owned, which wasn't much. A guard appeared. Not the usual one. Someone from Thorn's pack. Come. Quickly. She followed. Through back corridors. Away from the main halls. They reached a servant's entrance. A carriage waited outside. Plain. Unmarked. Thorn stood beside it with Cormac and Desmond. All 3 Alphas looked furious. Inside the palace, she could see movement. The king watching from an upper window. His expression unreadable. Get in, Thorn said. She climbed into the carriage. 3 other wolves already inside. They made room. The door closed. Through the window, she watched the 3 Alphas approach the palace entrance. A tense conversation with guards. Then the king himself appeared. The conversation was brief. Heated. She couldn't hear words but saw gestures. Accusations. Denials. Finally, the king stepped back. Waved them away. Permission to leave. Thorn returned to the carriage. Climbed in. Knocked twice on the roof. The carriage lurched forward. Liora watched the palace recede. The stone walls. The towers. The cage that had held her for weeks. Then the carriage turned a corner, and it disappeared from view. They drove through the city. Past the market square where she'd stood on an auction block. Past fountains and shops and lives continuing like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The sun broke through clouds. Light spilled across the road ahead. The carriage picked up speed. Leaving the city. Heading north. Toward the territories. Toward Rylan. 2 weeks to figure out how to stop it. Or how to survive watching her mate pledge himself to someone else. She didn't know which was worse. But as the carriage carried her north through morning light, with Thorn's pack around her and freedom stretching ahead, she realized something. She wasn't just a victim anymore. Wasn't just a wolf who'd been sold and caged and used. She'd fought back. Risked everything. Survived. And she wasn't done fighting. Not by a long shot. The Northern Territories appeared on the horizon. Mountains rising like teeth against the sky. forests thick and ancient, home to the pack that should have been hers, home to the mate she'd barely spoken to but felt in every heartbeat. Thorn was watching her. 2 more days of travel. Then we arrive. And then we face whatever comes next. Together. It wasn't a promise. Wasn't a guarantee of a happy ending. But it was something. Liora leaned back against the seat, closed her eyes, let the bond hum between her and Rylan like a thread pulling taut. She was coming. And nothing, not politics, not duty, not a wedding built on broken promises, was going to keep them apart. Not anymore. The carriage rolled on through morning light, carrying her toward confrontation, toward choice, toward a future that was still unwritten. And for the first time since standing on that auction block, Liora felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. Hope.